Hey everybody, welcome to the Living Faith Fellowship Discipleship Conference virtually. Obviously, many of you know that when the Discipleship Conference was going on at Oakland Heights Baptist Church, our host church, is when COVID-19 really broke out at the original. And so we had the first couple sessions of it, and then after that, we had to shut it down, obviously, based upon what we were being told by the state of Georgia, from the president, the CDC, all that. And so for best measures, we canceled the Discipleship Conference in-house. And so now if you're watching via this is the way we're going to get you that exact same information. I'm Pastor Corey Gordon. I pastor Kelly Harbin Baptist Church in Villa Rica, Georgia. And I was blessed to be asked to do 2 sessions on Wednesday. And so what I'm going to be talking to you about is discipleship from the book of Proverbs. And hopefully you've got a Bible where you're at. I know many people watch these things or listen to them like a podcast on YouTube or wherever it's being broadcast. But if you do got a Bible, I encourage you to grab that, get to the book of Proverbs, because that's where we're going to be at. But one of the things I want to bring you up to speed on is the fact that, number one, we sometimes think that discipleship is a New Testament concept. And that's actually a fallacy. We can go all the way back to the Old Testament and see guys like Moses and Joshua. We can go in and we can study guys like Elijah and Elisha, just to name a few. God's intention from the beginning is that spiritually mature people would invest their lives into other people and bring them into a place of spiritual maturity themselves. And so the New Testament discipleship is not a new concept. It has a new way of going about it. But I think by going back to the book of Proverbs, which is what I call the original discipleship book, I think you're going to find out that this paradigm of discipleship is clearly laid out in the book of Proverbs. Matter of fact, I don't believe, if you'll listen to this series, I don't believe you'll ever look at the book of Proverbs again the same way. And so I want to encourage you to really dive into this. We're going to show some really cool things that God has got laid out for us in the book of Proverbs. Now, a couple things that I do want to lay out also is what I'll be showing in session 1 and session 2 will not exhaust this concept of discipleship being in the book of Proverbs. Sometimes we go to the book of Proverbs and we think in terms of like a Twitter page. If you're on Twitter, you'll notice that these 140 characters that you can work in, and basically what happens is people are putting out random thought bombs from Twitter, and this is their thought of the day, or this is their thought on that subject, or so on. And a lot of times we go to the book of Proverbs because we've been trained that way to kind of look at it as individual thought bombs from Solomon himself. And so sometimes we go about thinking, well, the book is not really connected. It's just that here's a thought, here's a thought, here's a good thought, here's another thought. And at the end of the day, you'll come to find out that there is a, if you will, allow me to use the Twitter concept, a thread going all the way through the book of Proverbs that you're going to see is all about discipleship. And hopefully we can do our best to be able to show you those things here in this class. So as I said, I will not exhaust this. Generally, it takes us 6 to 8 weeks to go through this at our church when we teach it. But this here will give you the concept real quick in session 1, and then we'll go further in session 2 on it. So before we even get going anywhere, obviously this need to back up here. So discipleship through the book of Proverbs, session 1 is where we're going to be at here. And hopefully you've got notes or they're available for you online. But Psalms 19:7 is where we're going to start at. Now, you're going to think to yourself, well, I thought we were talking about the book of Proverbs. We are. But we're going to get the concept of why Proverbs exists from Psalms 19:7. And it says, the law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, comma. Then he says, making wise the simple. Now he tells you that the Word of God is designed to make the simple wise. And when we think of simple, we sometimes use that word in the English today to refer to a simple individual is maybe an unlearned individual or an uneducated individual or something along that lines, or even sometimes maybe a mentally handicapped individual. Well, he's just really a simple individual. That is not the way God uses the term simple in the Bible. We're going to talk about this, but God's reference to it is basically a clean slate or a blank sheet of paper. A simple individual is neither intelligent or unintelligent. He's just uninformed. He's neither really understanding of things or has no understanding. He just has never been taught anything. And so what discipleship is all about is being able to take the simple-minded person and bringing them into the land of wisdom. Okay? And that's what discipleship is. When we have people that get saved, trust Christ as their Savior, and they come into our churches, they don't know anything. They are simple. They don't understand all the concepts of God. All they know at that point is they realized they were a sinner in need of salvation. They trusted Christ through faith in Him. But outside of that, they generally don't know anything. And so what we want to do is take them through, as in our case, 18 lessons to teach them some things and give them wisdom. But I think everybody here would agree that you're never going to learn it all in 18 lessons. That the 18 lessons are just the starting point. But the whole idea is to take those that are simple, the blank sheet of paper, and that we write upon their paper them becoming wise, writing the things in their life and training them in such a way that they become from the simple into the land of wisdom. Now, one of the concepts that we teach here at my church, at Kelly Harbin, is we believe that discipleship is designed in such a way that if we can disciple you, somebody else can't. And what I mean by that is, listen, if you don't disciple your kids, if you don't disciple your church members, then the world will. You're going to be discipled. You're going to be trained one way or the other. It's either going to be by godly people with the commandments and the testimonies of the Lord to bring you into the land of wisdom, or you're going to be brought into a situation where you are being taught by the world and the world systems, and your view is going to be not a biblical worldview, but simply a worldview that's given to you by this world system. So, now that we've got our concept, our whole purpose is to bring the simple into the land of wisdom. Now, in the book of Proverbs, you have the simple one, you have the prudent man, you have the scorner, you have the fool, and you have the wise man. Now, this paradigm that is laid out, these 5 characters that we are going to see in the book of Proverbs, is the Twitter thread all throughout the book. Once you get these 5 people down in this paradigm, you start to realize this is not about an individual thought bomb. It is all about bringing you through the book of Proverbs with a thread of God showing you what true discipleship truly is. Now remember, Psalms 19:7, our job is to take the simple and bring them into the land of wisdom. So we have the simple one here, we have the prudent man, we have the scorner, we have the fool, and we have the wise man. And our job is to get him from simple to the land of wise. Okay, now, for those of you that may be questioning this, going, I don't know about all that. Well, 172 verses, or 20% of the book of Proverbs, directly in context deals with this paradigm of these 5 people. And now you're going to find out that many of the verses that we read in the book of Proverbs not just deal with one of these people, but multiple times there is a comparison of people in these verses. And it'll make more sense as we go along. So now that we've got our 5 down, the simple, the prudent, the scorner, the fool, and the wise man, let's dive into this a little bit. Now, do you realize you can't even get out of the first 4 or 5 verses before this paradigm starts? Proverbs that was written by Solomon tells you in the first 4 verses on why he wrote the book of Proverbs. And he says, the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, the king of Israel. Now he's going to tell you why he wrote it. He says, to know wisdom, and remember, our whole job is to get the simple to becoming wise. He says, I've wrote this to know wisdom and instructions, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instructions of the wisdom, justice and judgment and equity, to give subtlety to the simple. Now that word subtlety is translated in your King James Bible 2 different times in the book of Proverbs. That same book, it translates it prudence. And remember, we talked about the prudent man. That same word is translated, that subtlety there, into prudence. But second of all, it's translated into wisdom or being wise. And so he says, I've wrote this book to give wisdom or prudence to the simple. Okay? That's the whole concept that we learned out of Psalms 19:7. And he says, to the young man, knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and will increase in learning, and a man of understanding shall obtain the wise counsel. So we don't even get out of the first 4 or 5 verses, and God's already laying out the paradigm of, hey, I wrote this book of Proverbs so that you can take the simple one and bring him into the land of wisdom. Okay, so let's look at this simple one. All right, this is our first character. Now, what you'll see on the screen is obviously a t-shirt. Normally when I teach this, and had we been able to teach this up at Discipleship Conference at Oakland Heights when it was going on back in March, I would have had 5 t-shirts with those 5 characters on it. And I would have asked people to come out of the crowd and sit up on the front, and for me to be able to give you visual aid on what discipleship is. And what I use first is the simple one. Now remember, God describes this word as simple, as not unlearned, not ignorant, not uneducated necessarily. He's just a guy that hasn't been taught necessarily anything yet. It's not that he has a small IQ or a large IQ. God has described it as a blank sheet of paper. Nothing has been written of his story at that moment. Now, because we're not going to use pieces of paper, we're going to use white t-shirts. And notice that the simple has nothing written on his white t-shirt yet. He's a simple man. Nothing has been taught to him yet. And most of the time when we're doing discipleship, we're hoping for an individual that hasn't been taught anything yet, who hasn't had anything written on his shirt. Now, the truth be told, most of the people that we end up discipling either has a background in church somewhere, or maybe a different religion or a different denomination or a different concept of how we teach the Bible. And so a lot of times when we're going to start discipleship, if I'm going to take that man who's simple and bring him into the land of wisdom, I'm going to have to start, before I even start teaching him some things, unteaching him some things. In other words, somebody may have wrote some things on his shirt, and I've got to wipe that off. I'll come back to that as we go along. Now, his characteristics of the simple one are this. He's a blank sheet of paper. Like I said, that doesn't mean he's smart or dumb or none of that. It just simply means he has no training as of yet. He hasn't been taught anything as of yet. He's a blank sheet of paper. He's number 2, void of understanding. Okay? There's a void in his life of understanding. He doesn't understand anything. Why? He hasn't been taught. That's what discipleship is. The problem in most churches is somebody gets saved. We invite you to church. You come to know Jesus as your Savior, and we go, great. Hey, we have church at 10 o'clock on Sunday. We have Sunday school, and we have church on Wednesday night. Why don't you come to all those things, and you'll be good to go. That's how the average Baptist church works out there. And yet God says, no, your job is to make disciples. Your job is to be a disciple-making church, so that when somebody comes in void of understanding, how we keep him from getting bounced around and being tossed around with every wind of doctrine is we do train him to have some understanding. But when he comes in the door, he's void of that. Number two, he's gullible. He believes every word. Okay? So when we have that young man who is the simple man, he's gullible. He believes all kinds of stuff. You know, in today's world, we have a lot of people that like to go online and they like to study, whether it's conspiracy stuff or whether it's, this podcast or that podcast, or hey, and they're just drinking all this in. Well, if you're a simple one and you haven't had any training in discipleship, well, you can be blown about with every wind of doctrine real quick because there's all kinds of stuff going on out there. It reminds me of Mars Hill, where the book of Acts and Paul comes along and here they are. They just want to hear a new thing. Well, that's very dangerous to a simple one. He's gullible. He believes every word. Number two, he lacks insight. So when he does get information, he doesn't necessarily know how to process it because he lacks insight, okay? He's easily deceived, okay? Now, these are all important, and I know I'm going through these, and we're going to talk more about it in just a second, but I want you to really understand and picture in your mind that young man who is simple, who is void of understanding. He is a blank sheet of paper. He's gullible. He lacks insight, and he's easily deceived. And the reason being, as I said at the beginning of this, if we don't disciple our people, the world will. And if you're not careful to train your people in discipleship, what you're going to find out is the world is going to come along. And remember, that simple one, even though his heart may be pure before the Lord, he's easily deceived. He's gullible. He lacks insight. Okay, so Proverbs 7:7 says this. He's void of understanding. He says, and beheld among the simple ones, there he is, I discern among the youth that a young man void of understanding. It's not that he can't understand, there's just a void in his life from understanding. And a lot of times we use this. Now, I noticed, notice the Bible doesn't use the word teenager. That word really gets coined back in the 1950s, but it uses the word young man. And I'll use my son. My son is 17. He works within our church and does some ministry stuff in our church. But when it comes to life, my son truly doesn't. He's much smarter than I am. He has a much higher IQ than I do. He's in advanced classes and all that stuff in high school and the IB programs. But when it comes to figuring out life, he ain't there yet. He's a young man. And God uses that term young man, and here's the reason being is he's mentally still a youth. Physically, he's becoming a man. So his body is starting to look like that of a man, but his mentality is still that of a youth. And so God uses that term young man as a simple one. Now, the problem is that we in our churches, we've come to this realization there is still a lot of adults running around there that have the body of an adult, but the mentality of a child or a youth. And we have that in our churches today. And how we get them beyond that is through discipleship. So he's void of understanding. And believe me, guys, hang with me. This will pick up. I want you to hang with me. I'm going somewhere with all this. Now, number two, he's gullible. He believes every word. Proverbs 14:12 says, the simple believeth every word. But notice this, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. Now, who's the his? It's the simple one. Okay? The simple believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. Now, so he's giving you, this is the first time we've seen this, in this paradigm of these five characters, this is the first time we've read a verse that has both of them in there. And he says, listen, that simple guy, that young man, he believes every word. Now, that can be great when we're training him in the Bible. But it's also a very big pitfall with what all else is going on out there in the world and what all can be said to a young man that he will believe. Now, he lacks insight, okay? A prudent man, here we go again. It's got both the men in here. A prudent man foresees the evil and hideth himself. But the simple pass on and are punished. Okay? And so he lacks insight. He can't see down the road. He doesn't see the long-term effects. One of the, and somebody will probably be mad for me using this example. I personally am not for tattoos. If you want to get one, great. I support your freedom in Christ to do that. I personally don't want one, not interested in it. And one of the things I've always told the young people in our church that do want to get them, well, think down the road, okay? Have some insight. And I know the concept that you're wanting to tattoo on your arm, you think you're really into it now, but believe me, you won't be into that 10, 15 years from down the road. And I always tell these people, you know, young lady gets a butterfly tattooed to her arm, and she doesn't have the insight to know that one day she's going to be a grandmother, and all that skin's going to be wrinkly and so on, and that beautiful butterfly is going to look like a pterodactyl on the side of her arm. Now, once again, please don't read into this. I'm not saying don't get tattoos. That's your business. That's not my world to deal with. I'm just showing you it's a matter of insight, okay? It's the same thing in the dating world. If we're going to date somebody, we got to look down the road and say, hey, man, is this really somebody I could see myself with the rest of my life? And if the answer is no, then why are we dating them, okay? Why would we ever start dating someone who we couldn't look down the road and see ourselves with? Now, understand, to the simple one, he can't see down the road. But the prudent man, he does see down the road, and he sees the evil that's coming, and he goes and he hides from that, okay? Now, so not only that, he's easily deceived, okay? We can go to the New Testament to find this. Romans 16, 17, and 18. He says, now I beseech you, brethren, mark them which cause division and offenses contrary to the doctrine which ye have learned, and avoid them. So he's basically saying, listen, mark those that are contrary to the Word of God. He says, mark them, and you avoid them. He says, for they that are such serve not the Lord Jesus Christ. Now he's talking about those that are contrary to the doctrine that we should be avoiding. He says, but they, their own belly, by good words and fair speeches deceive the hearts of the simple. Okay? Now, let me give you a real good example of this. If you're not careful, when your young people go off to college, they're going to find a professor, and he's going to do his best to deceive them. And how's he going to do it? Fair speeches and good words. He's going to say concepts and ideologies and stuff that come along, and they're going to go, oh, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds good. Not only do we see that in secular colleges, we see that in Bible college. Young man growing up in your church, being taught John 3:16, being taught that Peter, same thing that Peter says, that God is not willing that any should perish. John 3:16, that God died for the whole world, that God gave his beloved Son for the whole world, right? We all know those verses, and yet he goes off to college, and a couple years in, he comes back and he says, no, God only died for the elect. No, it's when Peter says it's not the will of God that any perish, he's not really talking about everybody. He's only talking about the elect. Now, we say that because we are a for whosoever gospel. We believe that God's desire is that everyone come to know Christ. But what happens is we go off through good words and fair speeches. We have people being deceived in the Word of God. Why? Because they're simple. Well, how do you stop that, Corey? Well, I'll tell you how. By discipling them and training them and bringing those simple into the land of wisdom so that these people cannot do this to them. And that's why I said, if you don't disciple your children and you don't disciple your church, then the world will, or somebody will. All right? Now, that's the simple man, right? Now we have the prudent man, okay? Now here's a guy, he's a prudent man, right? Now remember, The simple man's shirt was blank. It hadn't had anything written on it. But the prudent man has some things written on it. Conceals knowledge, regards reproof, looks after the simple, foresees evil, gets knowledge, covers shame. Okay, so let me tell you who the prudent man is. The Bible clearly describes him as a guide or somebody who is called to somebody's side to help guide them along. Okay, we call it in the New Testament the discipler. Okay, so when we have somebody come into our church who's simple and doesn't know anything and needs to go through discipleship so that we can bring him into the land of wisdom, well, how are we going to take the simple one and lead him into the land of wisdom unless somebody comes along his side and leads and guides and directs or disciples him? Well, that's what the prudent man is. Okay, now, so what happens is, now, remember, we're laying out a concept. We have the simple man with nothing written on his shirt. We have the prudent man. He's got some written stuff. And so his job, the prudent man's job, is to come, grab him by the hand, and lead him into the land of wisdom. Now, if this prudent man does not do his job, I can assure you somebody else is going to come alongside the other side and lead him somewhere else. And we'll talk about that more in just a few minutes. Now, as I said, here is his characteristics. He looks after the simple. He conceals knowledge. He foresees evil. He covers shame. He regards reproof, and he gets knowledge. In other words, the prudent man doesn't consider himself all-knowing. He's continuing to grow. I've been saved for nearly 30 years. And I was brought into the world of discipleship, the concept of discipleship, through Mark Trotter's ministry in New Philadelphia, Ohio. When I started pastoring, we went up to George Grace's church and learned church discipleship through their ministry, brought that back into our church. And yet I've been trying to do my best to disciple and train people, and our church has been trying to do that. And I can assure you, not one of our disciplers, people who are coming alongside, think they know it all already. We are constantly learning, and that's why the Bible says he gets knowledge. All right, now, so number one, we're going to talk about his characteristics. Proverbs 14:15 says, "The simple one believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going." What is the prudent man's job? To look after the simple man. To look after the simple one, the one void of understanding. He says, the simple believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. His job is to be a guide to him. He conceals knowledge. Now, we can look at this a couple different ways, but when you think about it, conceals knowledge? I thought our whole job as a discipler was to give knowledge, to train up people. Now hang with me, okay? Yes, our job is to train the simple one and bring him into the land of wisdom. And in doing so, we're going to give them knowledge, instruction, and righteousness, okay? We're going to train them on how to have those things so that they can come into the land of wisdom. But a prudent man, a good discipler, knows when to hold back knowledge, okay? So let me give you an example. I get a young man in my church. He may sit around, and I've had to learn this the hard way. I've had people come into my church, and they want to be discipled, and I say, hey, okay, let's meet over at my house, and we start meeting them. And let's be honest, there are some really cool things in the Bible. I mean, there's some deep studies that are really cool. I mean, we can go to Genesis 6 and dive in and be in some really deep stuff. We can go to Ezekiel 28 and talk about Lucifer and tie in Isaiah 14. We could go through the book of Job and go through Job's zoo there at the end, and we could talk about concepts like that day and those days and Selah and how they all have end-time prophecy. And man, we could go through the book of Revelation and talk about the three divisions and how that God shows his return. These are all deep things that we could talk about. And what happens is they're really cool and they're fun to dive into, and we can talk about the fallen angels and what do you think that key is in Revelation 9 and who are the two witnesses, and all that's great. But what happens is if you bring that simple one who is void of understanding and you just start dumping knowledge on him, what's going to happen is you're going to end up giving him, number one, information overload. And number two, if he does actually conceive all that knowledge, all you're going to do is create a puffed up individual who thinks he's in one place, who thinks, man, I am right with God because I know this, I know this, I know that. And all of a sudden, you got a guy who can't get his life right. And for some reason, he thinks, man, I've got it all going on. I just can't do what I'm supposed to be doing. Why? Because we didn't conceal knowledge. We didn't feed him properly. It's the old adage that you don't feed a baby steak, that they need sincere milk of the word. And we bring them along. And eventually, one day down the road, we do reveal knowledge like Genesis 6. Ezekiel 28, Revelation 9, Revelation 11, and we start talking about the Antichrist and all that, and then we can start making applications to what's going on in the world today. But until we get them rooted and grounded in the simple things of the Word of God and get them established in the Word from a faith concept, we should never reveal some of that. Now, you guys have heard the 2 Peter, how that we are to add to our faith virtue, and then once you add the virtue, then you add the knowledge. And what happens is, what we do is we skip the virtue part and we just start pumping them full of knowledge. And then we end up with freak shows on our hands. We end up with people who are casualties in discipleship. Because what happens is they understand all these deep concepts. The problem is they just can't figure out how to walk in the Spirit, that they not fulfill the lust of the flesh. And so what happens is we have people who we are training in discipleship who just can't get it. And the reason being is we're going down the wrong way with them, okay? He says, now notice, a prudent man concealeth knowledge. But watch, here's another concept, guy. But the heart of who? The fools. That's our fourth guy that we're going to talk about. Proclaimeth foolishness. And what we end up doing is creating a lot of fools in Baptist churches because we fill their head full of knowledge and not with wisdom and understanding. Now, he foresees evil. A prudent man foresees evil and hideth himself, but the simple one pass on and are punished. Okay? My job as a discipler is to be able to have some insight, look down the street and be able to know, hey man, you're really going to get in trouble if you go down that road. You need to veer off and go this way. Okay? We learn this concept as parents. Hey, we're trying to train our kids. Hey, I don't need you doing that. Well, why not? I want to. Well, because you're going to get hurt. Okay? So we can see that coming. One of the ways I explain this is, my church is here in Villa Rica. The main freeway here is I-20. It goes over to Birmingham. Let's say I get in the car and I go driving down 20 to Birmingham, and you're going to follow me, but you're going to be running about an hour and a half, 2 hours behind, and we're going to meet down there. And all of a sudden I get to Anniston, Alabama, and I call you and I say, hey, don't come down I-20, major wreck, road construction, you're going to sit for hours. You probably need to take Highway 78 and go around it. Now, does that mean I'm smarter than you? No, it means I'm just further down the road than you are. I can see evil coming. I can have a better view down the road than you do. Now, you can either go, well, Corey doesn't know what he's talking about, and get on I-20 and go sit there, or you can actually go, hey, man, I need to take his advice and go from there. Now, covers shame. Proverbs 12:16. A fool, here we go, we're getting some concepts here. A fool's wrath is presently known, but a prudent man covers shame, or he covereth it. And one of the things that we believe in discipleship, if you're a prudent man leading a simple man to a land of wisdom, that simple man's going to make some mistakes. And you have an opportunity to cover that shame. Now, I'm not talking about if a guy's in gross sin and not calling him out. That's not what I'm talking about. But the idea of a good discipler is a guy who sees a man get in trouble, and instead of openly shaming him, he's able to cover that shame, yet deal with the issue. In other words, pull a guy to the side and go, listen, you made a mistake there. That's going to bring shame to you and your family and so on. We're not going to announce this to people, but listen, we got to get this corrected. And listen, as a pastor, I don't want to know about all the problems and troubles that people have in our church when it comes to discipleship. I expect those that are doing the discipling to be able to handle those things behind the scenes so that it frees me up to do what I need to do when it comes to pastoring. And I much rather a discipler come along and grab a young man who's simple, understanding, who has made a mistake, and he correct it behind the scenes, and let's don't openly shame him. Let's handle that in a better way. Now, number 2, he regards reproof. See, a prudent man, notice here, he says, a fool despises his father's instructions, but he that regardeth reproof is prudent. In other words, he wants reproof. The day that you get into a place where you can't be told anything, and you can't have somebody come over to the top of you and say, hey, let me tell you something. Here's probably a better way for you to do that. Or, hey, man, when you can no longer accept godly, constructive criticism or correction and instructions, you're no longer in a place where you can be a prudent man. You're no longer in a place where you can disciple. A discipler will constantly accept reproof and correction. All right? Now, he gets knowledge. So a prudent man is going to continue to grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Like I said, I've been 30 years saved, and I'm constantly learning, continuing to try to grow in my faith in the Lord and know better and understand more things. That's the purpose here. He says, the heart of the prudent man getteth knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeketh knowledge. Notice how every time we're reading this, we're seeing at least 2 of the 5 characters. Now, let's talk about the scorner. This is our 3rd man who's up. He's called the scorner. Now, what is written on his piece of paper or his shirt? Proud and haughty, scoffer, won't listen, delights in disobedience, hates reproving, mockery, can't gain wisdom. Okay? So when we look at what's going on here, we have the simple man. Let's not forget about him. That is our main character. He is the focus of the book of Proverbs, is the simple one. Now, we said our job is to get the simple man into the place of wisdom. And what we need to do in order to get there, he needs a guide, a discipler, a trainer. And so what God says is, that's the prudent man. He's to come along and grab this guy by the hand. Now, if you are lazy, if you choose at your church to say, nope, we're not going to do this, that discipleship ministry, that's not for us. We're about building the church. We're about adding numbers. We're about just getting people in here to worship God and all that. If you so choose to take that path, then understand that our enemy has another discipler. He's called a scorner. So if you don't come along and grab the simple one by the hand, then you have to understand this guy will. The scorner will come by, he'll grab that simple one by the hand, and what he's going to do is lead him into the land of foolishness. When you and I should have grabbed that guy and led him into the land of wisdom. As you look down the history of our churches, and those of you that have been going to church for years, you ever look around and you go, man, whatever happened to that guy? Man, you see a guy out and here he is, and maybe he's went through multiple wives and went through multiple careers, and you go, man, I remember when that guy was going to church and he was faithful. What happened? I can tell you what happened. We didn't come along and grab him by the hand and lead him into the land of wisdom. What we did was we sat idly by while the scorner came by and said, hey, I'll come be your discipler. And that's what happened. Excuse me, I had to get a drink. So now, let's look at the scorner. Let's look at his characters. He won't listen. He hates reproving. He's proud. He's haughty. He delights in disobedience. Can't gain wisdom. He's a scoffer. And he's always about mockery. That's how you can always spot a scorner. He's always mocking stuff. Always ripping and second-guessing what the church is doing. And, oh, I wouldn't do it that way. And I can't believe they're doing that. I don't even know why they're doing that kind of music ministry. I don't even know why they want to do this thing over here. Did you see that thing they were planning for the kids? That's dumb. Why are they doing that? That's a scorner. As a pastor, I can spot him a mile away just by these characteristics. Hates reproving. You go to an individual and you reprove them and they hate it and they buck up against it, you know that's a scorner. Now, as I told you earlier, let's go back here. Here's his t-shirt, right? I can't tell you how many times that we have had scorners in our church who wanted discipleship. And before I could ever get into the lessons of training them into the wisdom of God, I had to spend some time bleaching out what was going on here. We had to go in here and wipe off what had already been written on their t-shirt so that we could get it back to a clean slate so that he could be like the simple guy again. All right? Now, matter of fact, most of our Baptist churches spend more time trying to bleach out what's already been written to get you back to a place to being simple just so that we can work with you. Now, let's go through these. Number one, he won't listen. Right? That's how you know he's a scorner. Discipleship is all about listening. And if you got a guy that's not going to listen, you know he's a scorner right ahead. A wise son heareth his father's instructions, but, now look at the contrasting, the wise guy and the scorner, but a scorner heareth not rebuke. Okay? That's how we know what's going on in his world. He doesn't want to listen. All right? There we go. Proud and haughty. All right? Proverbs 21:24. Proud and haughty scorner is his name, who dealeth in proud wrath. Okay? So there is another concept. Now remember, this guy is going to come along, your simple guy. He's going to come along and grab your disciple, your disciplee, the one you're supposed to be discipling. And what he's going to do is he's going to, through pride and wrath and mockery and rebuke, he's going to pull him away. And this is what he is. A scorner is his name. He delights in disobedience. Okay? It's not that he wants to do right. He gets off on not doing right. Now, as I'm describing this, I guarantee you, those of you that have been in church long enough, you're already thinking, yeah, I know a guy like that. I've met guys like that in church. You can see it. When you see church splits, these are the guys doing it. Okay? These are the guys coming in and they're splitting churches because they're always questioning what leadership is doing. Well, I wouldn't do it that way. Well, man, if I was in charge around here, this is not how I would do church. Well, listen, God didn't place you in charge. He placed that other guy in charge. And those other men that are with him are in charge. And so until you can learn to humble yourself, you can never be in leadership. And that's what this scorner is all about. Now listen, he delights in disobedience. Now watch, Proverbs 1:22. How long, ye simple ones, will you love simplicity? You know, some people are void of understanding like the simple man, and they just like it. They just like being in the place of not knowing anything, not having to worry about it. Because see, if they ever learned some stuff, they ever were trained, then all of a sudden they're now responsible for some stuff. So he says, how long, you simple ones, will ye love simplicity? Not knowing anything, void of understanding. And the scorners delight in their scorning, and the fools hate knowledge. Okay? So he's describing 3 out of the 5 characters here, and he's literally saying, listen, that's your problem. Those of you that are simple, some of you just want to stay simple. Just last week, my associate pastor was preaching, and he was talking about the man at the pool of Bethesda that wanted to get in, and Jesus walks up to the guy and says, will thou be made whole? And it's kind of when you read that, you're like, duh, I'm sitting here by the water. I want to. But the question really was asked of Jesus, do you really want to be whole? Because not everybody wants help. Some people like being just ignorant to what's going on, and then the scorner comes along, and he just loves his scorning. Now, here's our fourth guy, and he's called the fool. Okay? Now, the fool here is the ultimate place where somebody's going to end up if we don't do something. Now, watch. He has on his shirt, he mocks sin, hides hatred, no delight in understanding, says there is no God, says in his heart there is no God. His father is shamed, he's contentious, and he slanders. Okay, now hang with me. So here we are back to our concept. We have the simple one. Our job as prudent disciplers is to lead them into the land of wisdom. But if we choose to sit around on our blessed assurance and do nothing, then what's going to happen is the scorner is going to come around and he's going to disciple this guy into becoming into the land of fools. Okay? So what happens is when, I know of folks that used to be in church, used to be serving God. Now you look at their life and it's a total wreck and you're going, what happened? Well, some scorner come along and led them into a place of foolishness. Now, even though they may not say in their own language, there is no God, they're living as though there is no God. And what they're saying with their lifestyle is, there is no God. Okay? Now, hang with me. So he says, there is no God, mocks sin, slanders, hides hatred. His father is ashamed. He's contentious, no delight in understanding. Okay? Now, Psalms 53:1 says, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. And as I just said, the Bible talks about, Peter talks about, if we understand who God really is, then our conversation should be a certain way. And everybody says, what do you mean our conversation? Well, that word conversation is an old English word that it's not archaic. It's just we don't understand English very well. And that word conversation literally means manner of living, the way you live. Now you say, well, why don't they just say manner of living? Because the word conversation is actually a better word. And here's the reason being is because the way you live tells a story. The way you live is giving off a conversation. Okay? So the manner in which I live tells a story. And so even though you may have somebody that says, well, he's not an atheist, the way he is living as a fool, he is living like there is no God. The story he's telling is he's saying there isn't a God. And that's what happens to a fool. Now watch this. Number 2, he mocks sin. Look at Proverbs 14:9. Fools make a mock at sin, but among the righteous there is favor. You ever see that? People that mock sin, laugh at it, joke about it, when sin is a very egregious thing to God. And I know we're Laodiceans and we have a tendency to wink at sin. God doesn't. God sees that as absolute unholiness and that we are commanded to be holy for He is holy. And you can see people all the time making mockery of sin. And I'm not talking about out there in the world. I'm talking about what goes on in our churches. All right? Now, the key is we understand you can point them out by seeing who's mocking sin. Number 3, his father is shamed. Proverbs 17:21. He that begetteth a fool doeth it to his sorrow, and the father of a fool hath no joy. As a father of 3 kids, nothing is more pleasing to me that my 3 kids are serving the Lord Jesus Christ. But if so be that at some point one of my kids chooses not to serve the Lord, it's going to be absolutely a shame for me and my wife. Here I am, a pastor of a Baptist church who believes in training people to serve the Lord, and yet I can't even get one of the 3 kids of mine to serve the Lord? Man, what is the deal there? One of the things that I teach at our church is I said, when my kids get old enough, I have a 22-year-old, I have a 20-year-old, and I have a 17-year-old. Now, all 3 of them still live at my house and probably will forever. They're millennials, so they never leave home. But they live at my house, so they don't really have an option on whether to go to church or not. You live at my house, you're going to church with us. You're not staying here, okay? So, but as far as their ministry at our church, I don't make them do that. They so choose to do that. And so one of the things I've taught at our church is when my kids get old enough and they're out on their own, if they choose not to serve the Lord Jesus Christ, then you need to fire me as a pastor. I am no longer qualified. Now, when I say that, it ruffles feathers, and it's probably ruffling feathers right now. Here's the reason I believe that. Number one, when we look at the qualifications of pastoring, he says that one of them is having your kids in subjection. Now, you can make that sound like, well, that only applies to the 18 and under. I don't even think when he says having your kids in subjection means in subjection to you as the man of the house. I believe he's saying if your kids are not in subjection to the Lord. My job is to lead my kids into serving God. Now, let me ask you, if I can't lead the 3 most important individual disciples I'm ever going to have on this planet into serving God, how am I going to lead the whole church into serving God? So therefore, if my kids chose not to serve the Lord, it's going to bring an ultimate shame to my life. And I truly believe my job is to lead my kids in service to the Lord. Now, number 4, I believe it is. No delight in understanding. The fool hath no delight in understanding. He don't want to understand. He's happy not knowing. The greatest thing about an atheist is he's already blocked it all out, right? He no longer cares about trying to understand or have a conversation. The great thing about him being an atheist is he no longer has to think on God. He no longer has to have a conscience towards what he does, because after all, if there is no God, then when I die, I just go out of existence, so who cares, right? Well, that's how a fool lives. A fool hath no delight in understanding. He doesn't want to know, all right? Now, we're going to get to our 5th guy right here, okay? Wise man. All right, this is the ultimate goal where we're trying to take the simple man to. The simple one is to be led into the land of wisdom. We learn this first chapter 1. I wrote the book of Proverbs. Why'd you do it, Solomon? So that we could bring wisdom and understanding and knowledge to the simple one. Okay, so on his shirt, you have shall inherit glory, makes a glad father, loves rebuke, he wins souls, he refrains lips, he listens to counsel, and he departs from evil. Okay, now, here is our concept that's laid out. The simple one. What's our job? Psalms 19:7. Bring them into the land of wisdom. Simple one. What's our job? Proverbs chapter 1. Hey, we are to bring wisdom and understanding to the simple. Well, how do we do that? By discipleship. The prudent man is to come over here, grab him by the hand, and lead him into the land of wisdom. But if we choose to sit on our do-nothings, then what's going to happen is the world is going to send their discipler. And that discipler is going to come over here and grab that simple one, and he is going to lead him into the land of fools. And so the concept of discipleship throughout the book of Proverbs is laid out in this 5-person t-shirt concept. That what we are basically doing is we have a chance to bring you into wisdom, or they have a chance to bring you into the land of fools. And what's happening is most churches do not do true biblical discipleship. Everybody supposedly does discipleship, but not biblical discipleship. And what we end up doing is having people in the land of fools. Now, let's go over these things. Shall inherit glory, loves rebuke, makes a glad father, refrains his lips. He wins souls, listens to counsel, departs from evil. Now, number 1, he shall inherit glory. Now, this thing about glory here is not heaven. First of all, it's a lowercase g. He's not referring to a place here. When he says glory, he's actually talking about glory here on this planet and bringing honor to you. And so he says, the wise shall inherit glory. Now, we know this. We can see this in the New Testament. The Bible says, the Christ in me, hope of glory. That doesn't mean the Christ in you, the hope of you going to heaven when you die. No, it's the Christ in you is the only chance or the only hope you have at bringing God glory. And so the bottom line is, the wise shall inherit glory. You say, I don't know if that means here or one day in the future. No, well, let's keep it in concept here. But shame shall be the promotion of fools. Now, that shame that comes on a fool is in the presence. It's not someday in the future, somewhere in eternity. That fool, he gets his shame right now. So why wouldn't, in context, that glory still be right here in the here and now? The example I would use is Alan Shelby. Alan is a wise man, and we as other pastors in Living Faith have a tendency to look to Alan as leadership, and a lot of it comes about because he has earned that right. As a wise individual, God is bringing him glory here. Now, there's nothing wrong with that concept. We're not talking about him sharing glory with God. We're talking about God bringing him glory and honor here in the now. Loves rebuke, right? He loves being rebuked. As a person that is going through life, I love to be told when I'm out of line. And, well, I say I love it. I love it when it's coming in the right manner, okay? And when somebody who is also a wise individual pulls you aside and says, hey, Corey, what you're doing, you're going to end up causing pain and anguish to your family, your ministry, your church, your job, whatever. That is a blessing that somebody does that. Let me give you an example. If I'm driving down the road and the bridge is out, I would want that guy to stand out and go, hey, stop, don't go down the road, the bridge is out. I wouldn't look at him and go, who are you to tell me I can't go down this road? Now, what would really be bad is if he knew the bridge was out and he says, I don't really want to bother that guy, and I just drove my truck on down the road and boom, I ended up in the creek, okay? A wise person loves rebuke. They love to be told when something they're doing isn't right because their greatest passion is to do right. Now, they make glad their father. Remember, the opposite is the fool made a shame to his father. The wise man, he brings his father gladness. But a fool, he brings heaviness to his mother. Now listen, as a Bible-believing Christian, nothing brings me more joy than the fact that I have a 22-year-old daughter that sings in our band at our church. That I have another one that works in Awanas, and my son, he works with our middle school kids, teaching class with them every couple weeks. And so all that, man, I appreciate that. That brings me joy and happiness in my life that they're serving the Lord. No delight in understanding, okay? That verse is wrong there. I'll have to get that corrected. Hopefully it's right on your notes. But he does have a delight in understanding. A fool doesn't have delight. He departs from evil. The simple one believeth every word, but the prudent man looketh well to his going. A wise man feareth and departeth from evil, but the fool rages as in confident. Now, notice he gives you 4 out of the 5 right here in these 2 verses. A wise man feareth and departeth from evil. All right? God told us in the New Testament, he said that he would never allow you to be tempted more than you're able to bear, but in the temptation, he is going to give a way of escape. A wise man looks for that way of escape. A fool walks right around that way and heads right into the mess he was going in. He refrains his lips, okay? Some of the wisest people are the quietest, i.e. Alan Shelby again, all right? He may be the smartest guy on the planet. I don't know. He never says much. But either way, he definitely doesn't say much, and that is a sign of wisdom. All right? Now, he focuses above. All right? Look at Proverbs 15:24. The way of life is above to the wise. Colossians 3. If we're risen with Christ, seek those things above. We should be having an upward upward look. The simple, the fool, the scorner, his focus is in the here and now. The wise, he's got his focus on above. Now, that's basically it as far as the 5 layouts. Now, we'll talk a little bit more in the next session about some of these things and get a little bit more deeper. Now, once again, the concept I just showed you of the 5 guys, let me move back here to this concept. The wise, the prudent, the simple, the scorner, and the fool. I'm laying this out to basically give you the way the book of Proverbs is laid out. Now, if you will go on in and start reading the book of Proverbs with this paradigm set up, it will change the exact way you read the book of Proverbs. You will never read the book of Proverbs again the same way, now knowing that God is using it as a discipleship book. And remember, we're trying to disciple, but so are they. And you can learn a lot about your enemy and how they're trying to disciple out of the book of Proverbs. And bottom line is, we should be learning through that on how we should be discipling. So that's it in session 1. We'll be back again with session 2. So if nothing else, God bless you. I hope you received a blessing.